There was once a reckless young man named Daniel who inherited a massive fortune from his parents. He spent his days throwing wild parties and surrounding himself with women and friends who enjoyed his wealth. One morning, after a particularly crazy party, when Daniel woke up, he felt so sick, vomiting several times. He was so disappointed that none of his friends stayed back to ensure he was okay. As he sat on the bathroom floor, he felt lonelier than usual. His parents were no more. He had no siblings, and his friends obviously flocked around him for their selfish gains. Suddenly, a strange longing crept over him. He wanted someone who would care about him for who he was, not for what he had. But marriage was out of the question because Daniel did not believe in love. So who could give him the kind of unconditional affection he craved? A child, he said to himself, but he laughed it off because he knew it was impossible, because he was sterile. Daniel was unable to have a child. Years ago, after one of his many careless one-night stands, he contracted chlamydia. By the time he sought treatment, the infection had already damaged his reproductive system, leaving him unable to have children. He burst into tears as he realized how his poor decision had messed up his life. Then, out of the blue, he did something he had not done for many years. God, if you fix my body, I'll make a donation to the church. He repeated over and over, clinging to hope that God would see his desperation. 2 days later, he went to the hospital for his usual health checkup. In faith, he asked the doctor to check his reproductive system. In his heart, he hoped that God had performed a miracle. Later that evening, he received a call from the doctor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel. There is no change. You will not be able to have children." After the call, he burst into tears again. "Of course, God will not help someone like me," he said, amidst his tears. But God had a different plan for him. Weeks later, Daniel received a call from a hospital. A woman named Clara had asked to see him urgently. Daniel was shocked to hear her name after so many years, but he went to the hospital. There, he found Clara, pale and frail, lying on a hospital bed. The room had a faint smell of antiseptics, and the sound of distant beeping machines filled the air. The doctor explained that Clara had cancer and was in the final days of her life. Daniel felt sympathy for her, but could not understand why she had called for him, especially since he had treated her badly during their short relationship years ago. "We have a 4-year-old daughter," Clara said weakly. As briefly as she could, she explained that after their affair, she realized she was pregnant. Not wanting to have anything to do with him, she successfully raised the baby on her own. But now she was ill and thought their daughter, Emma, needed to know her father. Daniel was shocked. Now that his miracle was here, he could not believe God came through for someone like him. Over the next few weeks, he stayed by Clara's bedside. It was the only gift he felt he could give her. Every day, Clara's friend would bring Emma to the hospital, and Daniel always looked at Emma with love. She was his favorite part of his day. They clicked so easily, and every time he held her in his arms, he felt blessed to be holding his own miracle in the flesh. The walls of the hospital room were adorned with handmade drawings from Emma, featuring bright suns and flowers, which added a cheerful touch to the somber atmosphere. After Clara passed away, Daniel became Emma's full-time guardian. His life changed completely. He gave her the best clothes, toys, and even enrolled her in a great school. His days now revolved around work and his daughter, not parties or wild living. However, his friends were not happy with this new Daniel. They missed the Daniel who spent tons of cash at clubs and unnecessary events. Dan, you're acting funny. I have 3 kids, and I'm not as boring as you, his friend Sam told him one day. Daniel ignored him. Although he missed his party days, he was enjoying the new life he had created for himself. One day, he returned home from school with his daughter, Emma. Just as he was about to enter his house with her in his arms, his neighbor called out to him. Daniel was shocked. She was speaking to him. Yes, it was a luxury estate where people minded their business, but it felt as though this particular neighbor and her husband despised and ignored him because of his wayward lifestyle. Wow, such a pretty girl. The woman, whose name was Elsie, commented, and Daniel walked toward his gate to speak to her. They greeted and introduced themselves, and Daniel told her that Emma was his daughter. The woman played with Emma, and Emma cheerfully smiled back. Just as Daniel was beginning to head inside, the woman said to him, "You have such a precious gift. I hope God blesses me with a child someday." Daniel saw how she immediately became sad. He felt sympathy as he was in that position before. He agreed with her in faith and stayed longer before heading inside so Elsie could play with Emma longer. Days after that, whenever Daniel and Elsie would bump into each other after school runs, she would play with Emma as usual by his gate side. As time went by, she invited him in to see her husband, Henry, and slowly they became family friends. One evening, he received a call from his friend Sam. "Where are you, Daniel? The event has started." Daniel was confused as he had already told Sam that he would not be attending his birthday party, as it was at night and Emma's nanny would have closed for the day. But Sam insisted. "Dude, it's not a club event. It's just a small gathering. I always show up to your events." Sam continued to insist. Daniel realized he was right. Daniel realized he was right. Daniel was silent for a while, thinking of what to do with Emma. Suddenly, he remembered Elsie and Henry. He knew they would love to have Emma for some time, but he was not sure about the timing. He quickly rushed over to them, and they agreed to keep her for a few hours. Immediately, Daniel left for the party, hoping he would be back in about 2 hours. But he was wrong. When Daniel arrived at the party, it was not the small gathering Sam had claimed. It was a club with loads of women and drinks. He wanted to go back, but he decided to go in, stay for an hour, and leave. But Sam had more plans. Coincidentally, during that period, Henry and Elsie had been undergoing a 7-day spiritual cleanse with a spiritualist in quest for a child, as they had tried and failed to conceive in every way. That same evening, just as Daniel dropped off his daughter, the spiritualist came for their usual night prayers. The man sat in silence, claiming to be in communication with his deity. Then he said, "We need a contact to invite your child, who has refused to come, to enter your womb." The couple became confused. They asked him if the millions of money they had paid him was not enough to contact the child they wanted. The man shook his head and said it was only the first step. He then took a long look at Emma, who was absent-mindedly playing in the corner of the living room. The soft glow of a nearby table lamp illuminated her tiny face as she moved her toys around. What a coincidence that this child is here today. We will use her to reach out to your unborn children. The couple immediately understood what he was implying and refused, saying that the child was their neighbor's. The spiritualist told them that no harm would come to the child. He would give her something to swallow, which would make her unconscious. And in the next 2 hours, they would make prayers while the child went into the spirit world to do the needful, but he was lying. He knew the couple was desperate and wanted to use it as a tactic to get more money from them. As for the substance he wanted Emma to swallow, it was merely a concoction to put a person to sleep, which he carried around alongside his other herbs. Over at the party, Daniel was about to leave when Sam noticed and began to tease him loudly. "Where is the latest nanny in town headed? The party has not even started. The party has not even started." The people around them laughed, and those who knew the old Daniel agreed with Sam. With their constant teasing, Daniel felt his ego being bruised and decided he would stay a bit longer and show them how to party the Daniel way. He went out and called Henry, telling him there was severe traffic and it would be best if he found a hotel to stay for the night as driving late was a risk. Henry, who answered his phone on speaker, got a thumbs up from his wife, and he told Daniel not to worry, as Emma was asleep and safe with them. As soon as he got off the call, the spiritualist said, "What other sign do you need? Everything is aligning for your favor." The couple looked at each other, hugging themselves and crying in each other's arms. It had been a long time of childlessness. On a normal day, they would have said the spiritualist sounded bizarre, but desperation clouded their judgment, and they gave him the go-ahead. After all, like he said, it looked like everything was aligning in their favor. Emma was given the concoction, and she fell asleep as planned. The prayers began, and the spiritualist assured them that Emma had begun the journey to find their missing children. After the prayers, the spiritualist instructed them to let Emma sleep because she would need all the rest she could gather to be healthy the next day. They followed his orders and sent him a huge amount to appreciate his work. As they dropped Emma on the bed, she opened her eyes slightly and went back to sleep. The couple was happy that indeed no harm came to the child, and they went to bed. What they did not know was that later that night, Emma eventually slipped into a coma because her body did not react well to the concoction. The following morning, Daniel showed up at his neighbor's home to get Emma. As he waited, he began to hear scattered footsteps and panic upstairs. About 2 minutes later, he saw Henry rushing down the stairs with Emma in his arms and Elsie following behind. Apparently, Elsie had tried to wake Emma up, but she did not respond, so she alerted her husband, and they both decided to come downstairs with Emma. Daniel immediately took his baby from them, and they all rushed into the car and headed to the hospital. The ride was filled with tense silence, broken only by the sound of Emma's faint breathing. "Your baby is in a coma. I hope we can save her," the doctor said to Daniel. He asked Daniel questions that could help him treat her while he waited for her lab results. Henry and Elsie were also questioned, and in fear, they denied knowing what had happened to her. But Elsie was not strong at heart. She went to the corner where she thought no one was listening and called the spiritualist, explaining that the substance he had given the girl had made her unconscious. Fortunately, The doctor overheard her conversation and privately alerted Daniel, who immediately called the police. The police arrived, arrested the couple, and took them away for questioning. Now Daniel was left all alone with Emma. He began to weep because the doctor hardly gave him any hope. "I do not know what to say, Daniel." She was brought in very late. Daniel called his friend Sam for comfort, and indeed Sam offered him some comfort. But just as they were talking, he said, "Bro, I have to go. My kids need me now. My wife had to watch them all night while I was out. I can't let her handle everything. You know, family comes first, man." Daniel felt foolish. Listening to Sam prioritize his family. If only he had done the same for Emma. The next days were very tough for Daniel. He showed up for Emma every day. He prayed for her, talked to her like she could hear him, read her favorite bedtime stories, and even told her jokes, hoping to bring her some comfort. The walls of the hospital room were covered with cheerful posters featuring animals and smiling children, which Daniel had brought in to make the environment less clinical. One day, just as unexpectedly and miraculously as she had entered his life, she opened her eyes and woke up. Daniel was overjoyed. He felt honored that God gave him a second chance, but he knew there was more work to be done. Daniel distanced himself from his old friends and completely let go of his old lifestyle. He sold his luxury mansion and moved into a smaller but luxurious apartment, one that allowed him to stay close to Emma. He ensured to prioritize her well-being. And as the years passed, Daniel often marveled at how one small child had turned his reckless existence into a life filled with meaning. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a story of redemption and love. Remember, our actions have lasting consequences, but it is never too late to make a change for the better. Cherish the people who truly matter in your life and strive to create meaningful relationships. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and comment on what you've learned. Stay safe, stay kind, and until next time, goodbye.